Well, hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to present Dion McCormick, no relation, who is our lead solutions engineer, along with Sarah Mitchell, who's in charge of our documentation department. Dion will be going through, we'll actually be answering a couple of questions that were submitted earlier this week. He's going to teach you some things and some tricks and techniques, but he's also here to answer your questions, as we all are. So you can go ahead and type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. Hello, Dion, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Let me make you the presenter.
Dun, dun,
And there's your
dun.
screen. Awesome.
Awesome. Well, Dave, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for taking the time to join us this week. It's going to actually be a Q&A week. We've gotten some excellent questions and requests to guides at alphasoftware.com. So we want to go ahead and do our best to answer and guide people through those. So we want to say thank you very much to the individuals who sent in those kind of questions. Appreciate it. And if you have any questions that you haven't already submitted, you are welcome to go to the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel and enter your questions now. When you do that, we will review them and see what we can do to answer them. So far we've been doing okay, but as always, there are many other resources that are available that we want to make sure you are aware of. There's obviously the guides at Alpha Software. There is also the online forum, which actually is very active. We have a very active developer base, and a lot of times you'll find questions there being answered or samples or examples, etc. So that's always a good area to go into. And then obviously, as always, we have the fabulous, absolutely fabulous documentation site, which is a living site which continues to improve, get better, and just over time have more and more resources that are available to you. Thanks to Sarah, who's joining us today, does an amazing job. I mean, keeping up with this is just crazy, given how fast the development team works, and those pieces there is just pretty busy stuff. So those are some other resources we want to make sure you're available, or you know that they're available, and we're good to go. But today we're going to focus, excuse me, get that frog out of my throat. Today we're going to focus on some questions that came into guides at alphasoftware.com. By the way, we also have a fabulous YouTube channel that all of that our Q&As are posted to on a weekly basis. So also you can check out that there. First and foremost, NCAA football coming up, starting tomorrow night. Well, there was a game this weekend, Miami, etc. It was a good game. But really the official kickoff is this week. We got a lot of really good teams playing starting tomorrow. This Georgia Tech Clemson is going to be a really good one. So we are excited to be almost into fall. I mean, we're not out of August yet, but we're pretty darn close to fall. And fall is such a fun time with the footballs, kids going back to school, Halloween, you name it. It's a great time of year. And just getting used to my new schedule, Dave, with no kids. So it's just kind of
It's nice, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, it takes actually it's like grinding gears. You got to like grind for a couple days to kind of get back into a specific schedule, but it's all good and all going really good. It's going to move fast. I know that. So, excuse me. Today, our first question came in from a user who is heavily using JSON. Specifically, they are working on integrations with third-party systems using the Alpha API capability. And built into Alpha, we have probably the most powerful capability, and I'll show you here to make your life easier, is the curl command to XBasic. So you find that anywhere in the code editor, you right-click, go to Genies, curl command to XBasic. So you can put in a curl command, and I'm not going to go through that there, but let's see, www.alphasoftware.com, something as simple as that. And obviously, it will be more extensive for other systems. You generate it, and it generates the XBasic. Now, interesting enough, with curl, sometimes you're integrating with third-party APIs, so you'll have built into it some JSON. So this particular user was putting together and had built a curl command, and it would submit to a third-party system. And actually, you know what? Let me see here. Hold on. I want to show you my favorite tool. If you're doing any API stuff, I highly recommend you download Postman. It is a free, you can sign up for a free account, tool for exercising APIs. We use it significantly within our own projects here, and it's just one of those sort of tools in your toolkit that allow you to do some really cool stuff and allows you to kind of quickly work with APIs without having to set up a program or do anything else from there. And the reason I want to show you is there's some really cool stuff here. So, oh, here's a good one. Let me go to Adafruit. I've been playing with IoT stuff. And so, for instance, in this case, it's an online site called Adafruit.io. They do like microcontrollers and stuff like that. And they have basically a API that allows you to put information to this, basically collect data and throw it up onto basically a dashboard kind of scenario in a static function. So in this case, this is a post transaction where you're going to call this endpoint right here, and then you're going to pass it in this case, just something simple like form data of a value. Other things are more complex, meaning you'll be putting in, say, JSON or other pieces there. The reason I show you there is that first you want to kind of make sure you understand how the API works and what it does from there. Then the next step you have to do is, I'll show you another example here, is then once you have there, then, or I'm sorry, here, you just can send it and then you'll see a result that comes back saying whether it was successful or not. And you'll see in this case, notice that it was successful. It shows me that, yep, it got created on the back end, etc. So this API sent back some JSON back to me, telling me that my transaction occurred. Now, this is simple where I'm using what's called a form data value, but sometimes you have a situation where you need to submit JSON to the API. So you're going to submit something like this to the backend API. So often you have a scenario where you need to go ahead and do that. So let me go ahead and show you. One of the cool things about Postman, I know it's not answering the direct question, but we'll get there, is that one thing that's cool about Postman is that after you have kind of got this working, you can go up here to this code thing here, and they have all the different ways you can generate the code to generate there. And some of them are built in, like for instance, Node.js, Python, which we'll be using much more in the future. Like I can say, write a program with Python that uses some built-in functionality, this is what it would be. You copy paste it. With Alpha, what we do is we go to curl. Here's my curl command. I can copy this curl command here. So now I've copied that curl command. Now I can go into Alpha, paste it here, and if all goes well, which it usually does, it will generate a set of XBasic for me. And it is actually making a live call here. So we're doing a live call and it'll come back here. The XBasic to send that to the backend system. And then you can just copy this XBasic into a function or into your system and you're good to go there. Of course, it would pause while we're doing a webinar, of course. I should really test these things before we do a webinar. Bad practice on my part. Sometimes it's just going to time out when it tries to do this and we'll let it time out from there. Now, the key challenge is when you're doing that, you need to, and especially if you're submitting JSON, you need to create this JSON and then submit it as along with the function to the backend process. And that is what we ran into with this one client. So let me go ahead and just, for speed, I'm just going to get out and get back in real quick. Come on. It really won't let go of that API. There we go. Still there. Okay, and okay. So the issue was this. In order to submit to the back end, their particular situation is they had a set of JSON. So what you're seeing on the screen is an example of this JSON. And you'll see that it basically is hierarchical JSON. It has like auth and request and method and then a set of parameters. And each of these parameters are pieces of data that need to be submitted to the back end. So the question was this, is that I need to generate this JSON and then I need to be able to, on the fly, maybe change a couple of these values before I make the call to the back end. And then I should submit all of this JSON to that back end API, and then you get a response back and you parse it and you do what you need to do. So the question was, well, how do I do that? Well, one of the coolest things about Alpha is two really powerful features or functions. One's called JSON parse and the other one's called JSON generate. So I'm going to put in a debug here just to show you this. So I've got a set of JSON. So what I did is I grabbed that sample JSON, said, okay, this is what we need to generate. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And so I've loaded up into this JSON variable, that JSON, and then I'm going to turn that into a pointer variable, which is a very powerful concept because you could do text manipulation on JSON, but it's much easier when you have a pointer. So watch, I'm going to step here. It takes that JSON and turns it into a pointer. Now the pointer is basically a multi-dimensional array structure. So you can see it's taken that JSON and it has done the ID here. So let's go in here and you'll see now, let me expand this out a little bit more, that I can go in and look at an item and I can see how to access that information. So for instance, move-in date. So once I've converted that JSON into a pointer, I can then access individual items through more of a programmatic way instead of saying search for this value and then look over to the right, etc. So the way I do this is then once I've converted that into JSON, I can now modify that JSON pointer. So I've turned it from text into a pointer. And so now I can go in here and let's go ahead and look at this. So there's my current value for JSON pointer method params move out date. So if I want to change in my JSON the move out date in my JSON, what I did is I took a basic level of JSON, I converted it into a pointer. Now watch on this command, I'm going to change that value, watch down here. So you'll notice that now in the pointer variable, I've changed this value just by using an equals statement to what it should be. Now here's the real magic. I'm now going to take this pointer and I'm going to convert it back into JSON. And now when I look at my converted JSON and I scroll down, it's the exact same JSON I started with, but this value now has a new value that is the one I updated it. So a common practice is to get a piece of JSON, convert it into a pointer, edit the values of that pointer, and then use the built-in JSON generate to reconvert it back into JSON. And now you have essentially a updated JSON you could submit to your backend API. So the neat thing about that is that once you've created this JSON, when you could save this as a function. So whenever you need to update it, you could create a function where you basically pass it like move out date, move in date, etc., and then do the update so you can capsulize it from there. But the trick was I started out by grabbing the JSON that they provided me. I said, hey, let's look at it in a pointer structure. So I did that. And then just using the debugger, I'm actually able to go down and I can just navigate through and look at the different pieces of it. So let's say I want to change property ID. Well, there I go. That's how I refer to property ID in that JSON that's been converted to a pointer. So then I could edit that and put it in there. And this just becomes kind of standard way to go. And the neat thing is these two application functions, JSON parse, which converts the JSON to a pointer, and then vice versa from a pointer back to JSON. It's kind of a round trip process from there. So I hope that gives you some pointers. The idea, or no pun intended, hope it gives you some ideas on how to approach this. Again, you could go through and do some other methods. So other methods I have seen is that in here, I do like a string replace. So I say find this string and then replace it. So you could manipulate the JSON directly, but I find the JSON generate and also JSON parse to be just a little bit more readable. There's less methodologies to it. Once you kind of know the structure of what that pointer is going to be, and you can do that by just looking at the debugger, then you're in a situation where you can then just manipulate the data very simply, and Alpha will take care of moving it back and forth within JSON. Just to kind of illustrate it, one other method I've used before, and this is just if you're interested in this, is let's say I wanted to swap out these lease ID type IDs as a variable in here. I could go in here, and what I do is this. I go, and there's no magic to what I'm doing, but I'm actually taking this and making a unique piece of text I need to replace. So now what I can do is I can do JSON is equal to JSON or string tran JSON comma, and then the substring to replace, and I'll explain this in a moment. And this is more the brute force. I like the other method much better. Comma, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so method 2 is I put a placeholder in my text, and then I use what's called the string tran, which will take that incoming text, search for this value here, and actually that should be a curly bracket, and then replace it with the value here. Now, there are challenges in terms of, making sure this works correctly, etc. Like, do I have the right things? There's different things you'll have to go through and modify it. But basically, all this is doing is a string replacement. So that's sort of a brute force. I tend to like here, and there's another reason I tend to like the pointer. And here's the reason why. You'll notice in here that these parameters are sort of single level. But often I'll find JSON has multi-level nested data. So for instance, let's say it's a API call where you have properties and then you have a sub thing called rooms, and could be one or many rooms. You may have a situation where you need to generate the JSON and it's just not always the same structure. In that case, you really need to look at using a pointer because you can dynamically add children to a pointer and it can generate that kind of parent-child JSON. So I tend to move towards this way. This is kind of a nice, simple brute force, but often you'll run into situations where you just don't have a static JSON, so you need to do things dynamically. So I hope that's helpful. That's kind of a wrap up on this. If any questions on this, I'll take those. And I have another question I'd like to approach in a moment, but I'd like to go ahead and open it up, double check our voice, etc. I'm going to take a sip of water here while you.
Excellent. Yes, so questions. First question was actually not related to this. It was just that, is it possible to get an outline or an agenda of these sessions? And in fact, after we make recordings of the sessions and put them on YouTube, which we are catching up with, we're still a month behind, but hope to catch up by the end of the week, we do in fact write a description of what is in the videos. So what you need are the link to that particular YouTube playlist, and if you scroll through, you'll actually see what we discussed in.
So let me go up there.
I'm going to go ahead and put that there.
Is it out
That's the question window. Let me put it in chat though, because I did paste in the wrong window.
Oh, sorry. There we go. Oh.
There we go. Oh.
I like how YouTube has like the strangest blah 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 blah. You have to be like memorizing.
You really want this kind of autoplay though, so hit pause and then pop over here. Ooh, once it finishes loading.
Yeah, it takes a moment. There we go.
So where it says Alpha Anywhere Demo and Q&A. Okay, there you go. If you click up here where it says Alpha Anywhere Demo and Q&A, up at the very top.
Right. Wait, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it. Nope. Okay. Yeah. Click on that. That'll give you this page.
There we go.
And so here's API Genie. The one on June, it was Viewbox Demo, CMRI software, update on iOS styling. So they're all there right basically after the hyphen. So that's how you kind of find out what each session is more or less about. What we're working on doing, but still haven't done it yet, certainly talking about it, is doing using Google to actually create transcripts for our videos. So you could actually search through the transcripts and see where a particular thing was talked about during a particular webcast. So we're working towards that. We're not there yet.
By the way, people, when they watch this webcast, are going to go down the rabbit hole because they're going to be in the YouTube playlist and then within it and in and over.
And then in the YouTube playlist. That's a good point. If they knew how to get there. Question for you. Another question, and it does have to do with, in this case, JavaScript. It says, in JavaScript, is there a command to convert a JSON string to a JavaScript object?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, that's built into it. JavaScript, JSON to JavaScript object. So they're very similar. That's always been kind of confusing for me.
JavaScript and
yeah. So this is JSON. So that's text. And you can see you're getting, name value pairs there. There's a function called JSON parse that will turn it into an object. So it's just JSON uppercase, and very important, JSON parse is uppercase. If you don't do it uppercase, it's going to throw a problem. There's also something called, to do the opposite, if you have a object, you can do what's called JSON stringify.
Stringify. I love that. Stringify.
Very cool. Let me go ahead and, let's see. There it is, right below it. Yeah. So in this case, you have a JavaScript option or object, And then you can turn that into a Java or JSON string by using, again, uppercase JSON stringify. And by the way, this is super important. And the reason why is sometimes when you're doing debugging, Alpha, like for instance, if you want to read a row in a list, it will give it back to you as a JSON object. And then what you can do is you can do like a console log stringify that object. And then what will happen is and actually, you know, let me go ahead and just show that. Let's see, let's go here. I just want to show this real quick. I've used this a lot, which is pretty important. I'm going to go into an A5W page. Oh, you know what? I don't want to do it there. I'll come back and do that. I'll show you an example of that in a little bit. But I find that this JSON stringify is very handy because it allows you to kind of see in a string level information. You can throw up alerts with strings and stuff like that. So it's really handy.
Awesome. Very cool. This person says they maintain a web app that still has a couple of DBF tables included. They're wondering how you could generate JSON for the records in the DBF table.
So JSON from the DBF tables?
Exactly.
Or JSON?
So in other words, DBF to JSON.
Absolutely.
That would be a little XBasic script, I think.
Script, yeah. There's not a built-in function to do that, but you would basically, and here's how I would approach that. Let me go ahead and show you how I would approach that. And I'll do it in pseudocode here. So I'll create a new one here. So I would sit there and I'd say, first I'd go dim JSON as C, and then I'd go dim JSON pointer as, and I'm going to go JSON pointer array, because you might have multiple rows, as P. So what I do is I would then, you know, read the DBF table using standard XBasic. Then the next thing I would do is loop through the values. And this is how it would look in the loop. You would say, okay, and then let me do one other thing. You'd go dim index as in. So the first thing you do is you hit your first record, you say JSON pointer array dot append, okay? And I'm going to fake this just to do it, but I'm going to sit there and go, for instance, index is equal to, okay. So now I can sit there and I can go JSON, oh, you know what, how is it? JSON pointer array index dot name is equal to Phil. I'm sorry, my keyboard's a little wonky today and I can't do squat. I'll slow down. And then I'll go right here and I'll copy this. And I'll go name, phone, 800-555-1212, and then let's say zip. So, okay. So what I do is I loop through these values, and what you're going to do is just iterate through this thing over. And I'm going to do it hard-coded. I'm basically going to add 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2. Okay. So I've gone through and I've taken the data out of the DBF tables. I've looped through each row and I've populated this array. Now what I'm going to do, and I might as well just go debug 1 here. I'm going to now go JSON is equal to JSON generate JSON pointer array. Okay, and then I'll go show var JSON. So let's go. So I'm using the same concept where I'm loading up a pointer array and doing that. So let's see what happens if it blows up. Okay. So first thing I want to do is show you my pointer array. And you can see it's a pointer array is a series of, it's an array of values. Think of this as each row in your DBF table. And then if you go in, then each row has this column. So name, phone, zip, etc. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this overall array into JSON, and now you'll see here is my JSON array. So you'll see that you start out with a little square bracket, then I have my first record here. Sorry, it's hard to select in here. So I've got my first record right here, and then there's a second, and then this is my third record here. So Alpha does all the work of generating the JSON here. So really all you need to do is create that query against your DBF table. Now I'm using a pointer, but there's no, or array, but there's no reason why you have to do an array. You could make this as an individual pointer and pull out a single row and then generate just one record of data using that methodology there. But that should be all you need to do to get it going, as you can see. And even though I'm hard coding this just is a loop, so this would just be putting in variables, and you would just run it as many times as you had rows in that table.
Excellent. Thanks very much. This is a question about, yes. Let me see here. Changing variables. I actually don't have a ton of questions. So
okay, then I'll go on to my next question.
Go to your next question, yeah.
You got it. So the question came in from Emily Latella from something New Jersey. What is it? I forget what it was in old time. But let's see. Go to who writes. Let's see. Where's my UX? Oh, there it is, right there. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new component here. And the question was this: a person has a UX with embedded components. I'm going to show that concept here, but I'm also showing it. And but embedded component needs to talk to the parent component. And the reason why is there's certain functionality on the parent that they want to interface with. So I'm going to go ahead, and the first thing I'm going to do is create a very simple child component. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go to my controls right here, and I'm going to put in a little piece of static text. I'm going to call it child component. Okay, and I'm going to put in here a button, click me to talk to the parent. Okay, so I've got, and I'll go ahead and I'll just say child underscore UX. Okay, so very simple, and it doesn't do anything yet, but we basically have a child component, and it just displays a piece of text and this button. And if I click on the button, it doesn't do anything. So now I'm going to create my parent component. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and put in a panel layout. And I'm going to go ahead and put in a panel card and another panel card. Okay. So right here, I'm going to say, and here I'm going to call this panel card PC child. Now, let's go ahead and save this. Okay. Then I'm going to go ahead here. And one of the most powerful things about Alpha is that I can take this parent, and what I can do is go to embedded object. It's under other controls, and I can pick another and click there. So now you'll see I have a parent. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in a header and a little piece of text here, so it's a little more interesting. Example. And I'm going to put right here a panel header. And inside there, just to make it clear when we run it, this is parent content. And then I'll put right here, I'll add a panel header here. And I'll add there, and I'll go child control UX. So save this, and let's take a look at it. So what will happen is when this loads up, the system will load up the parent, and then you'll notice it's loading up my child component here and renders it. So it looks like one big component, but on the fly. And the neat thing is that I can dynamically load these UXs, so I'm not limited to just having this one permanently set here. I could put in another one from here. Now the trick is, this is an embedded object. I want to click this and talk to the parent. So let's go to the parent here, and I'm going to go to my JavaScript items. Now remember, I'm on my parent here. So I'm going to go to JavaScript items, going to add a new item called show message. Actually, let me show you two things here. So first thing I want to do is, let me show you first how to work, and then I want to expand that. Okay, so I'm going here to JavaScript functions. And again, remember, I'm on the parent. So I go to JavaScript functions, and I'll say function show message. And I'm just going to make a very simple alert hello. And then I'm going to do a little close parentheses. So all this function does is show a hello message. Did it not like that? Let's see, how did I do that? Oh, with the curly bracket. Good old JavaScript. So what I want to do is this function is on my parent. But what's really cool about embedded objects is, and again, the function name here is called show message. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go to the child UX. I'm going to go to this button right here, and I'm going to paste show message. So I'm going to call that JavaScript function on the child. Now, very important, I'm going to go over here to JavaScript functions. That function doesn't exist on this UX component. It only exists on the parent. So let's go ahead and save this. Let me go to the parent, save this, and let's see if I have it right. So we've loaded up our parent. I'm going to click here and you'll see, oh, it did run that JavaScript. So what happened is Alpha first looked at, or JavaScript first looked at this UX and said, is there a function called show message? No, there's not. Okay, then go ahead and pass it up to my parent. So it passes it automatically up to your parent or to the parent. And then the parent says, oh yeah, I have a function for you. I'll go ahead and execute that for you. So the great thing about that now is that think of it as like a messaging system. Now, whenever you call a JavaScript function, you can just pass to the parent anything you want to. So you can have a whole series of messages. Now, what I wanted to show you was the following. Let me go ahead and go into my JavaScript actions, and I'm going to add a new action here. I'm going to call show message. I'm going to give it the same fancy. And this one, what I want to do is I'm going to use the cool transient message. I'm going to say cool message. And I'll go right here and click OK. So now I have a action JavaScript. By the way, that action JavaScript could be multiple actions, could do a whole bunch of things, could be moving panel cards around, could be doing XBasic callbacks, you name it. There's a whole wealth of things you can do within it. So now what I can do is the following. Now I've got this, I can sit there and say, click here to see the JavaScript code, and I will copy that to the clipboard, click OK. And then what I need to do is instead of alerting there, I'm going to actually put in this. So now when this is called, it doesn't just do an alert, it actually runs a action JavaScript, which is very handy. So now let me go in and do a full preview because I want to be showing you it in the full preview. Okay, so same concept. It's rendering the parent. It's going to render and you actually saw a little working message there. Now when I click that, notice it called that function at the top level, and then that function called my my action JavaScript. So you can nest this thing, and it's very powerful. Now, one other question is this. What if you need to pass information from the child to the parent? Well, you just use JavaScript for that. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say message for this, and then I'm going to go alert message. And I'm just going to go back to my original simplistic thing here. So I have a function at my top level, and it's expecting to get a value. I can go into here, and when I call that thing, I can say hello world. So I'm passing in that function item there. So for instance, that might have been a value on this UX. It might have been like someone clicking on a list on this, something along those lines. So now I have the ability to pass not only a command to my top level UX, but I'm also able to pass it information that it may need to further process that function. So I'll go here and notice I have hello world, because this called that JavaScript function with a variable or a parameter. Then on the parent, that JavaScript function extracted that incoming parameter and used it in the script. Because sometimes you'll need to have that information to be able to do the proper XBasic callback or to select a certain record or you name it. The sky's the limit. But the real trick here is on the parent, define your JavaScript function. On your child, call that. Don't define it on the child, but call that JavaScript function, and then if necessary, pass other items or parameters to that. So I hope that gives you a little pointer on how to combine parent and child UXs. Very handy, very powerful, and allows you to kind of dissect and break down your application into sort of a top level, here's my master component with master set of functionality, and then I could have all these dynamic. And because right now you'll notice in PC Child, I embedded it directly here, but in JavaScript Actions, let me go ahead and just put this in for right now and show you what it looks like. You can, if you want to, open a component and load it into a panel. So on the fly, you can be loading it. So let's say you had 10 different modes of UXs. You don't have to have them all embedded at once into that top level. You basically can on the fly say in this situation, load up that UX and make it available. And that again makes it really powerful when you develop your application, because right out of the get-go, you can go in and dissect your application into a set of sub functionalities and then wire those up as child UXs and then bring them into the parent as you see fit.
Excellent. As someone pointed out, you might want to be careful with naming conventions when you're switching between parent and child so as not to confuse yourself.
Indeed, absolutely.
Yeah.
You come up with a much better kind of structure.
So very related question, just as you were diving into that, someone said, hey, I'm new to Alpha Anywhere, I'm new to the UX components, and what they're looking for is just sort of a good maybe general guidelines or high-level outline of what should go into a UX, like how many controls before you start thinking about breaking it up into subcontrols, and sort of what are the trade-offs along that? Do they become slow and hard to manage, or can you put hundreds of controls in, or what's been your experience so far?
So first and foremost, there's no inherent limitation built into Alpha in terms of the number of controls. There are performance aspects to that. So there's two things that you should consider. One is when you're actually developing your UX, the more controls, the slower it saves things. Now, our latest release of Alpha, the pre-release, has a complete rewrite under the covers of the UX builder. And I apologize, there's a little background noise here. So the speed at which you can save and edit UXs is significantly improved over what it used to be in the past. Just a lot of work has been going on that because we've noticed people are building larger and more complex UXs. Now you do have a second performance impact, which is interesting and important to know. If you look at this, this is our representation. It's called a declarative layout. We're declaring the structure of what the user sees. Now, the actual generation of that is done through HTML and CSS, and it's done on the web browser or the mobile device that's doing it. So the one thing you need to consider is that when you generate a UX, all of this is turned into HTML and CSS. It's done ahead of time, meaning it's done when you save the component using what's called pre-rendering. Then when it's on the local device, they're just getting a set, the device just has to then take that HTML and CSS, and the regular web browser will render it into something the person sees. The consideration you have to take into account is the more complex, the more controls that are in there, the more HTML and CSS, the more work you're making the user interface do on the device, whether it's a web browser or a mobile device. And if you go to a situation where you start embedding and moving it into child objects, well, Alpha will generate the top level and any pre-made embedded, but it will only render these child ones when they're loaded in on the fly. So there's kind of a trade-off. If you want all this stuff available right out of the get-go, put it at the top level or embed it here because what it will do there. But the one thing you're going to want to look at is that if you're starting to see performance issues, you may want to start like, it's just sluggish to open up and load up your overall UX, then you may be finding out that you have many more UX there. The other part is that I like to take sort of a strategic level of what am I functionally trying to do for the user? Usually they're not doing 20 things at once. They're maybe seeing 4 or 5 pieces of content, but then they're then going to do a task, a thing. And that's where you say, oh, if they're going to do that thing, then maybe I can embed that function or that behavior into a UX. Now, one other thing I want to explain to you, you'll see when I embed an object here, notice the method for opening the UX, and I'm pointing over here on the right-hand side. You'll see that we can have AJAX callback. That means on the fly, it's always going to go back to the server to load this. So you have a little delay, but you know it's always going to get the most current child UX that's on your server. But you can do pre-computed, and what it will do is it basically grabs all these controls and basically merges it with the top level. So there's some playing around. You can do that in here. Definitely you want to look at this, especially when you're doing offline applications and you're using embedded objects. You want to use the AJAX if offline or online and pre-compute it if you're offline. So what it does is it says, oh, if I'm offline, I'm just going to use what I have locally if not. But in terms of general performance, I find once I get up to maybe a couple hundred sort of entities in my layout, it starts to get a bit sluggish, and I really start looking at how I can break that into smaller chunks. And more importantly, and you'll find this is important, and I don't have it here, I don't have Git enabled, but when you start doing team development, that's another consideration too, is that if you have 2 or 3 people, you know, if everybody's working on one UX, you have to continually kind of coordinate, oh, did you change that part of the UX to this? If you go to this methodology and break it into it, then you can say, okay, Joe, you're working on the child UX, number 1. Jane, you're working on child UX number 2. And therefore, when you go in to check in things and move them together, you're not stepping on each other and having to do, reviews to find out what changed, etc. So as you move into more multi-user development, you definitely want to look at using more of these techniques to kind of break it into smaller pieces. Thus, you won't step on each other. You make your process go a lot faster, and Git becomes your friend because, I can be working on mine, have my current version of the UX, then down the road, I check in the other stuff and merge it, put it together from there. So there's no hard and fast rules, but evaluate if you're finding it's taking longer for you to save, it's kind of getting sluggish, it's maybe time to break it into parts. If you find that logically it makes sense to break it into parts, I'd do that sooner than later. And last but not least is look at the performance on the end device. Now, I want to show you something in that light, and I think that's a great question. I'm going to go ahead and open this up in Chrome. So you say, well, great, Dion, that's neat, but how do I really understand what the performance is? Well, there's the first cut performance, which is just how fast is it running? Does it feel good from there? The second cut is this. I'm in Chrome here. If I go up to my 3 dots here, go to More Tools and Developer Tools. This is where I can open up and see my console, inspect elements in my thing, so a lot of there. But if you'll notice, there's a third one here called Network. And I'm going to go ahead and click there. Now watch what happens. I'm going to reload this page with Network open. And you're going to see that in a moment, did it actually show it there? Oh, I have to start it. Okay. Oh, no, there it goes. It just took a moment. Now notice what it's showing me here. This is showing me my timeline for what it took for this UX to be built and shown in there. So you'll see that it shows me actually sort of what is happening here. So you'll see there's 2 parts of it. So let me do a refresh here and we'll see what happens here. And so you'll see, okay, there's different actions occurring. So you'll notice that the first part of it was here, and then the second part of it was this second part, which is opening up the child UX. And so it can show you exactly how long everything is occurring to take in there, and then you can use that data to start optimizing your performance. Now, I'm running in live preview. I haven't optimized stuff, so it's a little slower than I'd like, but I could actually go in and see what's going on and what's causing any part of my system to be delayed and find out. So there was a queuing issue here and stuff, and I can start working on that. And this shows me all the things that it's bringing down and doing it. So again, I go to More Tools, Developer Tools, go to the network here, and then you'll see that it actually gives me a full network showing me how long it took for the server to deliver this. And again, I'm in development mode. It's using the development server. The development server is doing a whole bunch of other stuff behind the scenes. When I'm on a full-blown alpha app server, everything's been optimized. So it's going to be much faster than I see here, because it's just basically serving up and giving to the browser the content it needs to be rendered. But you can also look at, like, if you have a button here and I click that button, notice this here, you can see that took less than 10,000 milliseconds, and I can actually see exactly what happened in this time frame. Oh, I see. It's sorry, it's down over here. Actually, that's showing everything that went on, and then you can see that's like my little last thing that it did. So, for instance, if you're doing XBasic callbacks and other stuff like that, you're going to be able to see the performance right here in the profiler in the network. And so you can understand, well, how long are these things taking? And you can work on enhancing it. And that's one of the key things we're finding out. And part of the reason Alpha is really focusing on introducing like Python and Node, etc. XBasic is great. It's very flexible, very easy, very useful. But the only downside is XBasic is not exactly the fastest language in the world. And if you look at Node, it's basically using Google's JavaScript engine. So therefore, there's a huge amount of work going on in optimizing performance and stuff. So we're finding out that over time, we'll find that certain things are great for XBasic. You'll continue to use it. It's easy to do. It's easy to develop. But other more high performance aspects may be worthwhile looking at moving into either Node or Python. And the great news is we're going to make that easy for you. So you're going to be able to easily integrate it into your application and also go out and find a really good expert who can help you do certain more complex things in those languages and bring them right into it. So great question. I know I kind of probably overkilled it a bit, but I kind of wanted to show you a couple different ways you could go in and figure out how to determine the performance of your overall application at the same time of what the user is experiencing. And in here, then you can start saying, oh, you know what? This UX is taking a long time to load. So I'm going to go ahead and either delay the loading till my overall parent's ready to go, or I'm going to work on breaking that into smaller components, or there's a lot of tricks because built into Alpha, you can say, for instance, like with list controls and other things, you can say, don't render them until someone actually either sees it or you expressly refresh it. So the cool thing about that is it gives you a lot of hooks in terms of performance to be able to say, feed the person as they need the information. You don't sit there and load up 20 lists when they may not even see them. You can load up a couple of them, and then if they want to see the other list on the fly, you can refresh those and bring them up. So there's a lot of really cool tricks to kind of enhance the user experience for the user.
Question, is it possible to load any of these things in the background? Is there any control that's
yeah, so
JavaScript? Yep.
So a couple things is one, you do have control over here of when you render it. So for instance, this one is very important. So you can say delay render till visible. So let me go ahead and show you how that would work real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a panel navigator around this, and I'm going to delete that. And so now I have a panel navigator. So you'll notice in here, I'm only seeing my first panel, and then I have my second panel card over here. Now I'm going to go ahead and click this. Oh, it did render it. It's already in there. I have to find out why that's not in there. Did I set? Oh, there we go. I didn't even set the parameter. Bad development. Bad developer. So in this case, I'm going to load up this bad boy, and then I'm going to go over here, and then notice as soon as I started dragging it, it said working. And now it loaded up there. And in fact, let's go ahead and go into actually our live preview real quick. And again, this is where you can start having fun and kind of looking behind the covers. More tools, developer tools. Okay, network. So I'm going to do a refresh, reload this thing here. Okay, so it's going to load up. And what you're going to find out is that it's going to load it up a little faster. Because notice all it's doing is loading up the parent. Now I'm going to go like this and watch. It now triggered that second set of activity. So at this point, I only had the parent in there. I was looking at it. When I did this, it started loading up that second component. That second component took about 2.2 seconds or so to load up, render, and get onto my screen. So, but now it's there, it's there. I don't have to reload it. It's in that situation here. So there's a lot of things you can do in terms of delaying the rendering of specific objects. If you have a list control, and let me go ahead and just go to one of my list control things just to show you what it looks like. There are controls in here which are very handy. in the list control on the list properties, you are able to say, for instance, delay render till visible. So that's just similar to what I showed you here. And then the other is that you have delay render until explicit refresh, which means what it's going to do is even if it's visible, until you tell it to go to refresh, it's going to stay unrefreshed. So you can control when the web browser calls back to get the data. And this is really powerful because often you want to probably get a certain information in front of the customer. And then if they want more data, you can say, okay, show them that list and then go ahead and refresh it when they do that. And then they'll get a little delay there, but then they'll be able to control, you'll be able to control their experience. So
Okay, so that's okay. So if you wanted something to go in the background, but maybe like after part of it had been loaded, is there a command, like it said explicit refresh, is there some sort of JavaScript command or something or XBasic command that says now is the time to do that refresh?
Okay. Now, yes, within our JavaScript here, there's action JavaScript. Let me go ahead and just put it here for now. So for instance, for the list control, you have an action called refresh data. So you can do there. And once you've done that, you can actually just see the JavaScript, and this is the JavaScript that it generates. This is more extensive because it's like doing set, focus, etc. But anyway, it's really simple. It's basically, this is if you're doing editing, but really this is what it is just refresh list data. Now, another method you could do is this. Let me go back and cancel here. Let me go back into this here. I'm going to go into my parent object here. And I'm going to go to my JavaScript actions, and I'm going to add a new action, which is called load UX. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here, I'm going to add a new action, and I'm going to go for UX. And I'm going to select that child UX. So, oh, I'm in the wrong area. Wait. Oh. Bear with me. Let me go back to my UX area. When you're working with multiple projects, you tend to have these things here. Where is UX? Oh, there it is there. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go back to my parent. I'm going to create a JavaScript action. I'm going to call show UX or load. You actually better say load UX. Then I'm going to go in here. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to say UX. I know I'm going quick, but I want to make sure we get through this. So I'll find my child UX here. And then I'm going to go here and I'm going to tell it to load into a panel, and I'm going to load it into my PC child. So now I have a command that will load my child into this section here. So I'll go ahead and save that. Now, whenever I need to run that action, I can call this JavaScript, and that can be done on the client. So the client could be sitting there, and then when they click a button, I would say, oh, okay, run this. And then at that point in time, it would load up that UX into that PC child, and then it's available. So that way you could have fine-tuned control over when things are appearing for the user. I hope that kind of answered it, how I would approach that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I'd let Alpha do all. The key is use the JavaScript actions. I kind of showed that on the parent-child, is like let Alpha build all that stuff for you, and then just call these things. Now, very important, and this kind of goes back to our original. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And you go, you know what? I created a JavaScript action here. I'm going to go into my child, and I'm going to go ahead and run that here. Well, that won't work. And the reason why is that this says, oh, I'm going to look on the current UX I'm inside, my dialog it used to be called dialog. That's why it says dialog.object. I'm going to look at my JavaScript actions here for load UX, and it's not going to find it. It's going to load, it's going to die. So that's why in this case, you have to go to your parent, go to your function here, and put that here with a sort of a wrapper there, because then the child will find this function on its parent, and then that function will then call this action, which is on the UX it's on at that point. So a common mistake is people will create a button, and they'll go, oh, I created an action on my parent. I'm just going to go ahead and run that action. Well, the problem is this is basically a pointer to the UX you're in at that time. So in this case, child. And in that case, it's going to look and it's going to say, oh, yeah, you want me to do load UX? I'll be glad to do that. It'll go here and it's going to go, sorry, I do not know what you're talking about. You're crazy. But if you call it a function that's on the parent, the function says, oh, yeah, I'm here. Let me go ahead. Oh, I'm going to go ahead and call this. So you kind of pass the message along. And then that goes in and says, oh, yeah, here's my load UX. I'll go ahead and run the rest of the code. So that's something to consider when you create it. That's why it's important that if you create actions on the top level, go ahead and create your own function, your own JavaScript function to wrap it, and then call that from the child, and everything will work fabuloso.
Gotcha. Thanks very much. Another question, another sort of coding question, is that how would you go about telling Alpha it's time to update records when a disconnected app regains its signal?
Yeah, so what's cool is built into Alpha is if I go into a UX, and remember UX is the sort of primary animal for a mobile device, you'll see there's client-side events. And if you look in here, and where is that? Let's see, network, I think it's on, okay. Where is that? Is that, where is
I know it's one of them.
It's one of them, yeah.
Something right now.
On timer, fail. I keep adding so many new ones.
On connection change. Sarah has beaten us to it.
See?
All right. Thank you, Sarah.
So much smarter than us. Blot that out. Okay, here, you have a thing called on connection here. And then you can just call any JavaScript. Stuff. So basically the on connection change fires before when the internet connection is lost or recovered. So it happens whenever you recover. So you can detect when you go offline and it's true or false. So you can say, so what you could do is when this connection changes, you could set a local storage or a field on your system. So you kind of know what's going on. So you can say, before you take an action, let me check and see if my connection has changed from there. Now that said, there is also built into it. So this will fire automatically. Whenever it detects this, it will do whatever JavaScript is here. But just to let you know, there is another method in here. This is a really powerful one. And this is actually even more powerful than the other one, because if you run this server is available, it's called Dialog.Object server is available. It's going to actually go to the internet and try to talk to the server. And then if it comes back, it says, yes, you're okay, if not. And so you can basically say, in this case, if the server is available, go ahead and run this other JavaScript. So this allows you to kind of personally, you can write this and then you could put this on a timer if you wanted. It's a little bit of expensive because we already have that on connection change, but maybe on the on connection, you can say, oh, let me check to see if the server is available. Okay, I can either just ignore it or I can go ahead and do my actions that I need to do at that time. So you kind of have a combination of this is automatically going to be done, meaning this will fire
anytime it changes one way or the other, whether you gain signal or lost signal, that's going to fire.
Yeah,
and then the next one is going to say, okay, I know that I've either gained or lost. Did I gain signal? And if that's the case, I'm going to do my refresh. It's kind of the
And then in here too, there's some extra things where you can say, oh, if it's only been a minute since or like a couple seconds since I checked, ignore it, things like that. Sure. The thing what's the most popular on this is on connection change. You may want to set the like, let's say you have a sync button. And you say, oh, if my connection is disconnected, I'm going to go ahead and disable that sync button so they can't even try and sync. I mean, it'll continue collecting data on the mobile device and you'll be able to edit records, but you prevent the person trying to connect when you just know there's not a connection. And then when connection change goes true, then you can re-highlight that sync saying, or even send a message saying, guess what, you're now reconnected, you have unsynchronized items. Go ahead, that may become very annoying. But you can control the user experience by understanding whether you're online or offline.
Yep, awesome.
All right.
That is it for today. We've run out of time. There was one question we didn't get to.
Yes,
Maybe
I'm
we will
so
next
sorry,
time.
and we will get to that for sure.
But if you
Absolutely.
have any further questions out there, go ahead and send them to guides, GUIDES at alphasoftware.com. It is an email that is monitored by a team of us, and we will get an answer back to you and even do demonstrations on our Wednesday webinars. So, Dion, thanks very much for
Thank
presenting.
you.
Thank everyone for attending, especially those who asked questions to help keep our session lively. So guides at alphasoftware.com for future questions. Thanks again, and we hope to see you next week. Take care and goodbye.